The snow fell thick and heavy on Winterfell. The sky was grey like ashes, and the air was full of silence, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Jon Snow stood at the walls, sword in hand, ghost by his side. His black cloak flapped in the cold wind, and his eyes searched the horizon. He knew the Night King was coming. Not just his army of the dead, but he himself, the icy heart of darkness. And this time, Bran Stark was ready too. Inside the Godswood, Bran sat beneath the weirwood tree. His eyes were white, rolled back in a deep trance. Ravens circled above, and the old tree whispered secrets only Bran could hear. He wasn't just the crippled boy anymore. He was the three-eyed raven, the living memory of the world. Jon entered the Godswood, his boots crunching on the frozen grass. He looked at his brother. Bran slowly opened his eyes and stared at him. "He's close," Bran said, his voice calm but strange, like he wasn't fully there. Jon nodded. "Then we fight him together. You tell me where he is. I'll kill him." Bran didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "He's not coming for me this time. He's coming for you, Jon." Jon frowned. "Me? Why?" Bran looked into the fire in the small brazier beside the tree. "You are the last light in the dark. He saw what you did at Hardhome, at the wall. He knows who you really are now. Not just Jon Snow, but Aegon Targaryen. He fears your blood." Jon stepped back, stunned. He hated that name, hated what it meant. But now wasn't the time to argue about it. "Then we make him come to us," Jon said. "Together we end this." Bran closed his eyes again. In his mind, he flew like a raven over the dead lands. He saw the Night King on his pale horse, riding just behind Viserion, the dead dragon with blue fire in its throat. "They'll be here by dusk," Bran whispered. That night, Winterfell wasn't silent anymore. War drums echoed through the halls, fires were lit, men and women stood ready on the walls. Arya sharpened her blade. Sansa watched from the ramparts, her face pale. Tyrion and Davos moved between the soldiers, giving last words of hope. Sam held a dragonglass blade in shaking hands. But in the Godswood, Bran and Jon stood together. Bran had a plan. "He'll try to come here alone, like before. But this time, I'll trap him." Jon looked at him. "How?" "I'll go back, into the memory, into the place he was made. If I pull him there, his power will break for a moment." Jon understood, "And that's when I strike." Bran nodded once. As night fell, the ground began to rumble. The army of the dead had arrived, thousands of pale faces, empty eyes, a storm of ice and screams. Viserion flew overhead, blasting blue fire across the walls. But the Night King, he walked alone, toward the Godswood, toward Jon, toward Bran. Ghost growled low as he passed. Jon stepped forward, sword ready, Longclaw, shining in the moonlight. Bran closed his eyes again, slipping into the past, into the place where the Night King was first created, where the children of the forest drove dragonglass into a man's heart. As the Night King entered the Godswood, he stopped. For the first time, his eyes flickered with confusion. He felt it, something pulling him. He looked at Bran and saw not just a boy, but a doorway to his own creation. He raised his hand. Jon gripped his sword, and everything slowed. Bran's voice echoed inside the Night King's mind. "Come back to where it began." The Night King took one slow step forward, snow crunching under his boots. His blue eyes burned like frozen stars. Around them, the world was chaos, screams from the battlements, fire clashing with ice, Arya's blade flashing in the night, and undead claws scratching at stone. But in the Godswood, it was silent, timeless, like the eye of a storm. Bran didn't move. His body sat still beneath the weirwood tree, but his mind had flown back in time, back to the ancient forest where it all began. He stood in a memory, The trees were smaller, the world younger. The children of the forest surrounded a man tied to a stone, his eyes full of fear, a shard of dragonglass in their hand. They stabbed it into his heart, and he screamed, but then the scream became silence. His eyes turned blue, and the Night King was born. Bran didn't just watch, he reached out. But this time, the Night King was waiting. In the memory, the Night King turned and looked straight at Bran. Inside the vision, inside the past. "You should not be here," the Night King whispered. His voice was not cold, it was empty, hollow, like something that forgot what being human felt like. Bran stood firm. "You were created to fight men. Now you kill them all." "They feared what they made," the Night King replied. "So they caged me. But you opened doors." And suddenly, Bran was not alone. Dark shapes began to form in the vision, twisting shadows, thousands of them, men, women, children, all dead. Their eyes glowed blue. And among them walked the Night King in many forms, from many years. His past, his future, his hunger. Outside the vision, Jon Snow gritted his teeth. He could feel the cold pressing in around him, like hands choking the air. The Night King stepped closer, and Ghost growled fiercely, but didn't attack. Even the direwolf was scared. Jon knew he couldn't strike yet. Bran had said the Night King must be weakened first. But Jon's body screamed to move, to fight. The Night King raised one long hand toward Bran. Jon stepped between them. "Come on then," Jon growled, eyes locked on the Night King. "Let's finish it." The Night King tilted his head, not confused, amused. "You think a sword will change fate?" the Night King asked. His voice echoed like cracking ice. Jon didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on Longclaw. Back inside the memory, Bran was being pulled deeper. The vision was falling apart. The Night King was dragging him into a place beyond time, beyond memory, a place of shadows and screaming winds. Bran felt his own mind stretching too far, too thin. He was about to be lost. But then, a voice. "Hold on, Bran." It was Mira's voice. Not here, not now, but from the past, when she had pulled him from the cave, when Hodor died holding the door. Bran focused. He remembered who he was, not just a watcher, not just the three-eyed raven, but Bran Stark, son of Ned Stark, brother, friend. He reached into the darkness. And this time, he grabbed something. The moment the Night King was made, Bran twisted it, and in the Godswood, the Night King staggered, just for a second. But it was enough. Jon's eyes flared. Now. He ran forward, Longclaw shining in the moonlight. The Night King turned, but too late. Jon swung the Valyrian steel with all his strength. It slashed across the Night King's chest and cut through. A roar tore through the night. The trees shook. Ice cracked. The Night King screamed, not a sound, but a feeling. Everyone in Winterfell felt it. A scream in the soul. His body began to crack, like glass under heat. Blue light spilled from the wound, but he did not fall. Not yet. He looked at Jon and smiled. With a roar of rage, the Night King grabbed Jon by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Jon gasped, kicking, struggling. His sword fell. "Bran," Jon choked. "Do it." Inside the vision, Bran made one final push. He didn't just hold the moment of the Night King's creation, he shattered it. The dragonglass in that ancient memory exploded in the Night King's chest. And, in the present, the Night King burst into blue flame, light shooting out from every crack in his body. His hand dropped Jon. He took one step back and shattered into 1,000 icy shards. His crown, his armor, his eyes, gone. The army outside collapsed. Wights fell like broken dolls. The dead dragon roared once and then crashed to the ground in silence. In the godswood, Jon coughed and gasped for air. He looked at the shattered remains, and then at Bran, who slowly opened his eyes. Jon whispered, "You did it." Bran didn't smile. He looked toward the sky, where the ravens still circled, and said softly, "No, we did." The godswood was quiet now, too quiet. The ground was covered in shattered ice, blue crystal dust where the Night King had once stood. The fire in the brazier still burned weakly beside Bran, crackling against the cold wind. But around them, the world had changed. Jon got to his feet slowly. His chest ached where the Night King's hand had gripped him like ice had seeped into his bones. His breath still came fast, heart pounding from what felt like death itself, staring into his soul. He looked at Bran. The boy sat still under the weirwood tree, his face pale, lips trembling. "Bran," Jon said carefully, "you with me?" Bran blinked, once, then again. "I saw everything," Bran whispered. Jon didn't like the sound of that. "Everything?" Bran nodded slowly, but didn't explain more. Before Jon could speak again, Arya burst into the godswood, a bloody dragonglass dagger in her hand. "Where is he?" she shouted. "Where's the Night King?" Jon pointed to the shattered pieces. Arya's mouth fell open. "You did it," she breathed. "He's dead." But Jon shook his head and glanced at Bran. "We did it. But something's wrong." Arya looked around. The dead stopped. They just dropped. "But I thought it would feel like victory." She frowned. "Why doesn't it?" Suddenly, Bran's voice changed. He spoke not to them, but like he was somewhere far away. His voice echoed oddly, as if it didn't quite belong in the present. "He didn't die alone." Arya froze. "What do you mean?" Bran's eyes turned distant again. "When I pulled him into his beginning, something else came through. Something older, something worse." Jon stiffened. "What did you let in, Bran?" Bran didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "There is a place beyond memory, a place where even the children of the forest didn't go. That's where the Night King drew his power. I didn't know it had a voice until it spoke to me." Arya looked at Jon. "He's scaring me." Jon whispered, "He's scaring me too." Outside, the fires still burned on the battlefield. Men and women were cheering in confusion. Tyrion was trying to calm the chaos, while Davos and Sam checked the bodies, making sure the dead truly stayed dead this time. But deep beneath Winterfell, in the crypts, something stirred. Bones shifted, dust moved, and a cold wind blew through the darkness. Back in the godswood, Bran suddenly gasped and fell forward. Jon rushed to catch him. "Bran!" Bran looked up, breathing hard. The wall between life and death cracked. I thought destroying him would close it. But the Night King was only the gatekeeper. Something, older, waited behind the gate. It was bound by his existence. But now, it's free. Jon's stomach dropped. "What is it?" Bran's voice trembled for the first time. "I don't know, but it's coming." Arya stood silently, gripping her blade tighter. Bran slowly stood, leaning against the weirwood tree. "We need to go. The fight isn't over." Jon narrowed his eyes. "If this thing is older than the Night King, why didn't it come before?" "It needed a crack in time," Bran said. "I gave it that. When I entered the memory of his creation, I thought I was pulling him back, but it was waiting on the other side." Suddenly, Ghost growled low again. He turned toward the crypts. Jon felt it too, something cold rising, not just in the air but in the earth. A scream echoed from inside the castle. Arya ran first, swift as a shadow. Jon followed with Bran leaning on his arm. They passed guards yelling, people panicking. Tyrion was shouting from the walls, "Why are people screaming in the crypts?" In the courtyard, Sansa appeared, her face white with terror. "The statues," she said. "They're breaking." They descended quickly into the crypts. The torches flickered madly. The dead Starks lay still, bones wrapped in cloth, undisturbed for centuries. But one tomb had cracked open, and from it rose a figure in old black leather armor, its face hidden by a shadowy hood. It didn't walk, it floated, like smoke-wearing skin. The air around it rippled with unnatural cold. Bran's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not a man." The thing turned toward them. Its eyes were black holes, its mouth opened slowly, but no words came, only silence. Deep, unnatural silence. Jon stepped forward, sword in hand again. "What are you?" And from the silence, a voice crawled into their minds, not spoken, not heard, but felt. "I am what came before names, before kings, before fire." Arya raised her dagger. "Looks like we killed one monster just to wake another." The thing moved closer. Bran's voice shook. "We need dragonfire. Valyrian steel won't be enough." Jon stood firm, jaw clenched. "Then we better find a dragon fast." The crypt shook again, dust falling from the ceiling. Winterfell had survived the Night King, but something worse had taken his place. The cold inside the crypts wasn't like before. It wasn't just winter cold, or even death cold. It was the kind of cold that felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this world, like it was borrowed from a place that should never touch the living. The shadowy figure hovered above the cracked tomb, its form twisting like smoke under skin. Its hood never moved, but its eyes, black, endless, hollow, stared straight at Jon Snow. And something inside Jon, deep in his blood, told him this thing was not just a threat, it was hunger. Jon raised Longclaw again, heart pounding, but his hands weren't steady anymore. Bran's voice broke the silence. "It remembers me." The creature turned its gaze to Bran, and for the first time its shape began to change just slightly. It shifted like fog, wrapping around memory. Its voice returned, not through mouths, but through minds. "You walked into time, and time gave me a door." Jon moved to shield Bran again. Arya flanked the creature from the side, blade ready, eyes sharp. "What are you?" Arya asked. The voice answered slowly, like ice cracking across a frozen lake. "Before your gods, before your wolves and lions, I was the breath in the void." Sansa, standing behind them, whispered in horror, "This thing isn't from the north. It's older than the wall." Bran nodded. "The first men had stories of it. They never spoke its name, because naming it gave it power. They called it the Deep One, or sometimes just the Cold that Watches." Arya narrowed her eyes. "So what does it want?" Bran looked pale. "Everything the Night King couldn't take." The creature floated forward, no steps, no movement, just a shift in space, and all the torches in the crypts died at once. Pitch black. Then, one by one, the torches relit themselves, not with fire, but with a pale blue light, cold flames, ghostly, unnatural. In the dim glow, the creature raised a smoky limb toward Jon. "You are Fireborn, a broken prince." Jon's heart skipped. "You carry a name that should have burned me." Jon didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them like mist. "Targaryen." Jon looked at Bran, then back at the creature. "If you fear my blood, why not kill me now?" "I do not fear it," the voice echoed. "I need it." Suddenly it lunged not at Jon, but through him, a swirl of shadow and frost. Jon cried out and dropped to one knee, breath stolen from his chest. Bran shouted, "It's trying to take your fire, your soul." Arya charged. She struck with the dragonglass blade, but the weapon passed right through the creature like slicing mist. It didn't even notice her. Sansa screamed. Arya stepped back, blade useless. "It's not like the whites." It's not even like the Night King. Bran's hands trembled. It's a memory that became real. The Night King was its vessel. But now, it needs a new one. All eyes turned to Jon. Jon groaned on the floor, steam rising from his skin. The creature was draining his warmth, his life. Ghost lunged from behind and bit into the mist, but howls of pain echoed as the direwolf was flung across the crypt and slammed into a wall. Jon's skin turned pale, his lips blue. Arya looked at Bran, desperate. "What do we do?" Bran's eyes rolled white as he slipped into a trance, his last chance. He flew through time back to the first days of fire. He saw Valyria before the doom. He saw dragons born in flame, wild and pure. He reached for them not with hands, but with mind. "Come," he whispered to the past. "Come to the true blood." In the sky above Winterfell, Drogon stirred. Miles away, in the cold south, the last living dragon lifted his head. He heard the call, and he began to fly. Back in the crypts, Jon gasped, his body burning and freezing at once. The creature's form began to swirl faster, losing shape. Arya knelt beside Jon, shouting, "Stay with me! Don't you dare die again!" Sansa watched, tears frozen on her cheeks. "He can't hold it much longer." Bran whispered, "Just a little more time." The shadow inside the crypts cracked the walls. Stones fell, dust rained from above. But Jon's eyes slowly opened, glowing faintly with a mix of fire and frost. He growled through clenched teeth, "Get out of me!" With a sudden blast of light, a pulse of fire shot from his chest, blasting the creature backward. It screamed, not with sound, but with 1,000 memories being torn apart. It wasn't dead, but it was wounded. For the first time, it fled. The cold vanished. Jon collapsed. Arya caught him before he hit the stone. Bran looked up slowly, blood at his nose. "It's not over," he said. "But now we know what we're fighting." Sansa whispered, "And what is that?" Bran looked into the shadows, where the creature had vanished. A god. The sky above Winterfell had never been so quiet. The snow had stopped falling, the wind had calmed. It was as if the world was frozen not in ice, but in fear. Bran sat in silence in the war room, a blanket over his shoulders, eyes still glassy from the vision. Arya paced across the room like a caged animal, her fingers twitching for a weapon. Sansa stood by the fire, staring at the flames like they might whisper answers. Jon lay on a table nearby, still breathing but barely. His skin was pale, veins darkened, as if the shadow that touched him still lingered inside. Outside, chaos had turned into confusion. The battle was over. The dead were gone. But no one was celebrating. The people of Winterfell could feel it something worse than the Night King had been born. Tyrion entered the room with Davos and Sam, their faces grim. "We've sealed off the crypts," Tyrion said, "salted the ground, burned the remains. Whatever that thing was, we're not giving it a second chance to rise again." Sam shook his head. "It wasn't just a white, or even like the Night King. That thing felt ancient. I've never read anything close to it, not in the Citadel, not even in old Valyria's darkest scrolls." Bran spoke without looking at them. "Because it doesn't want to be remembered. It erases its own name from time. The moment it's written, it vanishes. The first men feared it, so they buried its stories beneath blood and earth. But now it remembers us." Arya stopped pacing. "So what do we do? Wait until it comes back and finishes Jon off?" Bran turned to her. "No, we go to it." Everyone stared at him. Sansa was the first to speak. "You want to chase a god into the dark." Bran's voice was firm. "If we don't, it will come again. Stronger. Next time, it won't just be Jon. It will want dragons, fire, bloodlines, everything that can challenge it." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you suggest we fight something that can slip through stone, speak into minds?" and shrug off Valyrian steel like snowflakes? Bran looked up slowly. We need Drogon. The room fell silent. Jon stirred slightly on the table, his eyes opened just enough to whisper, "Dragon." Bran nodded. He heard my call. Far across the sky, Drogon flew with thunder in his wings. His body was larger than before, stronger, darker. His scales had thickened, glowing faintly with red veins of heat. As he flew toward Winterfell, the sky around him lit with embers. Bran continued, "Drogon is the last of the fire, the only creature alive that can burn memory itself. And that's what this god fears most, fire that can erase it." Sam frowned. "But where do we find it?" It fled into the shadows. Bran looked toward the south, not the shadows, the fire. Sansa narrowed her eyes. "You think it's going to Valyria?" Bran nodded. "That's where it first touched this world. Where men and fire walked too close to secrets, the doom wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a warning," Arya asked. "And what do we do there? Pray it shows up?" Bran's voice lowered. "We bring fire it can't run from, and a bloodline it can't possess." All eyes turned to Jon. Jon tried to sit up. "So I'm bait now." Bran nodded once. "You always were." 2 days later, under heavy cloud and fading snow, Drogon landed in Winterfell. His body shook the ground, his roar cracked the skies. But when Jon approached him, weak and leaning on Arya, the dragon lowered his head, slowly, gently. Drogon sniffed Jon's hand, and then nudged it. He remembered. The bond was still there. Fire still knew its master. Bran whispered, "He'll take you to Valyria." Jon frowned. "What about you?" "I'll be there," Bran said, "but not in a way you'll see. I'll be watching through time, through flame. I have to go deeper, to where that thing hides." Tyrion stepped forward. "This is madness. We just survived death itself, and now you want to fly into the very place that broke the world?" Jon looked back at him. "We didn't survive death. We just opened a second door." As Drogon prepared for flight, Arya climbed up behind Jon. "You're not going alone," she said. He looked at her. "Valyria isn't for heroes." Arya smirked. "Good. I'm not one." With one final roar, Drogon lifted into the sky. Below, Bran sat beneath the weirwood tree again, eyes white, breathing slow. And somewhere in the ruins of Valyria, beneath the ashes and dragon bones, something stirred. Not quite dead, not yet alive, but waiting. The skies over Valyria were red, as if the land itself had never stopped bleeding. Smoke rose from shattered mountains, and rivers of molten rock ran through the broken valleys. The ruins of the old empire stretched below twisted towers, scorched statues, and streets once paved with gold, now cracked and buried under ash. Drogon circled once, his great wings casting a shadow over the land that once ruled the world. He roared not in anger, but in memory. This place was his ancestors' cradle and their grave. Jon held tight to the saddle as the wind whipped around him, face covered in soot. Arya sat behind him, silent, eyes scanning the ground. They'd flown for 2 days, barely resting. But now they had arrived, and Valyria felt wrong, not just haunted, alive, and watching. "Gods," Arya whispered. "It smells like fire never stopped burning here." Jon didn't answer. He couldn't. His chest still ached where the shadow creature had touched him. Something dark lingered inside him, cold, quiet, coiled like a snake around his heart. He didn't know if it was poison or a warning. Drogon descended into the ruins. They landed near a cracked stone bridge that hung over a glowing river of lava. The ground hissed beneath the dragon's feet. Jon climbed down slowly. As soon as his boots hit the ash-covered ground, he felt it, a pulse, like a heartbeat. But not his. Arya followed, blades ready. "There's something under us." John looked around. Not just under, he could feel it everywhere. They walked slowly into what remained of a great hall. Its roof had collapsed centuries ago. Great obsidian pillars leaned like drunk giants, and dragon bones littered the ground, some the size of ships, others small as dogs, burned, twisted, mutated. Arya stopped near a wall where Valyrian glyphs had melted like wax. This was a temple. John nodded. To what? A voice answered, not from her, not from him, but from inside John's mind. To what you forgot. John gasped and fell to one knee. His vision blurred. Arya ran to him. John. But he wasn't hearing her anymore. He was somewhere else. He stood in old Valyria before the doom. The streets were alive. Gold and silver cloths blew in the wind. Red priests walked among nobles, and in the sky dragons soared, dozens of them, screeching and magnificent. But below the streets, beneath the beauty, he saw it. The pit, a massive cavern, carved by fire, filled with black smoke and flickering light, and in its center, a cage, not built from metal, but from magic. And inside it, something moved, something vast, something ancient. John watched as a group of robed men, Valyrians, approached the cage. They chanted in a language older than High Valyrian, holding dragon eggs that pulsed with heat. They weren't worshipping the thing in the cage. They were feeding it. Why? John whispered. The vision answered. They believed they could tame a god. They used its whispers to control dragons. Fire obeyed them until it didn't. And John saw it. The doom. The cage breaking. The fire turning back on its masters. Valyria swallowed in a storm of flame. John snapped back to the present, choking. Arya was shaking him. What did you see? He stood up, breathing hard. It wasn't a volcano. It wasn't a curse. The doom happened because they tried to chain a god. The same thing that took the Night King. They thought they could feed it dragonfire and rule the world. Arya looked around. Then why come back here? If it burned everything, John's eyes darkened. Because it's still hungry, and now it wants out. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked. Drogon roared outside. Ash exploded upward as a hand, massive, black and glowing red, burst from beneath the stone. Arya shouted, "Run!" They leapt back as the floor gave way. A massive shape rose from below, half-formed, still burning from within. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a beast. It was a shadow made from flame and memory, smoke wrapped in scales, wings still forming. Eyes like twin furnaces opened and looked directly at John. You carry the blood of my betrayers. Arya threw a dragonglass blade at its chest. It melted before it touched the creature. John stepped forward, feeling the fire boil in his veins. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was Targaryen, dragon blood, fire made. He drew Longclaw again. The creature laughed, not loud, but inside his bones. You think fire can kill fire? Behind them, Drogon screamed, but John whispered, No, but memory can. And from far away, in Winterfell, Bran's eyes snapped open. He saw it, the truth beneath Valyria, and he began to pull at the thread. The god had risen, but its time was known. The thing that rose from beneath Valyria didn't have a name men could speak. It wasn't a beast, but it wore dragon-like skin, shaped by memories of fear. Its wings stretched, still forming, woven from smoke and bone. Its voice came not through air, but through thought, a whisper in every ear, a scream behind every silence. John stood his ground, as the ground trembled beneath him. The heat from the creature's body was unbearable, but inside him something else began to rise, a counter-heat, not from fire, but from blood, from the truth inside him. Arya stood behind him, bladeless but unshaken, her eyes locked on the creature. You said fire can't kill fire, she muttered, But what about a girl with nothing to lose? The creature's head turned to her. You carry death like a second skin, girl, but death is just a pause to me. John's voice cut in. You speak like a god, but you've only ever lived by feeding off fear. That ends here. The creature laughed, a sound like collapsing towers. You think because you carry dragon blood that you are fire. But your line betrayed me. Your ancestors used me to create dragons. Their power wasn't born, it was stolen. And now you return to repeat their mistake? John gripped Longclaw tighter. I came to finish what they never had the courage to. Outside, Drogon screeched and took flight, circling the shattered temple. The air grew heavy, vibrating with ancient magic. The creature spread its wings, and the ash that had slept for centuries began to rise, burning. Arya looked at John. We need Bran, now. John closed his eyes. He's already here. Back in Winterfell, Bran sat beneath the weirwood tree, shaking. His eyes had rolled white long ago. His body trembled, but his mind flew through fire, through stone, through time. He hovered over the creature, watching its core, its very soul, and what he saw stunned even him. Inside the god's heart was a prison, a cage made of ruined bones, built by the first sorcerers of Valyria. It was cracked now, but still pulsed with magic. Inside it burned the stolen memory of dragons, the truth of how fire first learned to fly. Bran spoke aloud in the godswood, though his body barely moved. I see you, he whispered, and I see what you fear. The creature flinched in Valyria. John saw it too. What did Bran do? Arya asked. John whispered, he found its beginning. And with that, the flames around the creature faltered, only slightly, but enough. John ran forward, swinging Longclaw. The sword struck the creature's chest, and for the first time, it cut. The beast roared, a terrible, ancient sound that cracked the mountains. It recoiled, smoke pouring from its chest where John had struck. You are still flesh, John growled. You bleed. You just forgot how. The creature lashed out with one clawed limb, striking John and throwing him across the hall. He hit the stone with a crack, groaning in pain. Arya moved in an instant. She had no blade, but she had death. She leapt, landing on the creature's back, climbing it like a shadow. She drove her bare hand into the open wound John had made and screamed a name. Not a name she'd spoken aloud. Not one she'd even remembered learning. A name Bran had whispered into her dream the night before they left. Valgaris, the creature screamed. Its form flickered. The name wasn't a word, it was a binding, a chain made of memory and blood, a name from before names, a secret that should have stayed buried. The creature fell to its knees. John, bleeding, stood up again. He could feel it, the fire inside him roaring now, answering the scream of Drogon above. This was it, the moment. He raised Longclaw with both hands and charged. The sword glowed red not from heat, but from will. It was no longer steel. It was remembrance, forged by fire and pain. John leapt and plunged Longclaw deep into the creature's chest. There was no scream, just silence, then light. Blinding, white-hot light. The god shattered not into dust, but into flame-shaped memories that swirled upward like fireflies. The temple collapsed around them. Drogon dove and caught Jon and Arya in his claws, lifting them from the ruins just before the stone gave way. Below, the ruins of Valyria burned again, not in destruction, but in purging. The land cleansed itself. The old magic, the twisted fire, the buried sins, it all burned. High in the air, Jon leaned against Drogon's claw, barely conscious. Arya looked at him. We did it, but Jon shook his head weakly. We just unburied the truth. Arya frowned. What truth? He looked at the burning city below. That man was never meant to rule fire. Drogon flew slow over the sea. Waves below were dark and endless, stretching like forgotten history. Smoke still trailed from his wings. His body was wounded, but strong, and in his claws he carried the last two wolves of House Stark, Jon and Arya. They didn't speak much during the flight. There was nothing left to say. Valyria had burned. Again. The god born of memory, betrayal and fire had been destroyed, but in its death it had shown them something worse than fear. Truth. And truth, Jon now understood, was heavier than any sword he'd ever carried. Hours later, Drogon landed in the fields beyond Winterfell. Snow was falling again, gentle, like the sky was trying to pretend the world hadn't changed. But it had. Jon slid off the dragon's back, wincing with every step. His ribs were cracked, his muscles burned, but what hurt more was the silence, the knowing. Arya climbed down beside him, quiet as ever. Bran was waiting at the edge of the godswood, already awake from his trance. His eyes met Jon's immediately. They were not cold, but they were distant, as if he'd seen something Jon hadn't. As if he'd already known how this would end. Jon stopped a few feet from him. "It's done." Bran tilted his head. "Yes, but it's not over." Arya crossed her arms. "We killed a god, Bran. If that doesn't count as over, I don't know what does." Bran looked toward Drogon, whose eyes still glowed faintly. The creature fed off memory, but it also left memory behind. Its death didn't just burn Valyria. It burned through time. Jon stepped forward. "What do you mean?" Bran said softly. "You're not just Jon Snow anymore." Jon's face tightened. "I never was." Bran nodded. "But now everyone knows. The whispers are already spreading. Ravens from the south, the east, the west. Lords are asking what it means, who you really are, what you plan to do." Arya sighed. "Here we go again." Jon looked to the north, toward the wall, then back to the castle. "I don't want a crown," he said. "I never did." Bran's voice was calm. "You don't have to wear one, but you're still a symbol. You fought death. You fought a god. You carry the blood of kings and the fire of dragons." Jon's eyes darkened. "And that's exactly why I should disappear." Arya frowned. "You can't just vanish, Jon. You're not a ghost." He looked at her. "Aren't I? How many lives have I lived? How many names have I worn?" She didn't answer. Jon stepped toward Bran. "I'm leaving." Bran looked up at him. "Where?" Jon stared beyond the trees. "Where no one remembers names. Beyond the wall." Arya stepped forward, her voice sharp. "That's running." "No," Jon said. "That's mercy." He looked back at Winterfell, at the castle built by his ancestors. "This place doesn't need another king. It needs peace." Bran finally spoke, softly. "I saw you walking beyond the snow, with a direwolf by your side, not running, guarding, watching something else rise in the shadows." Jon nodded. "Then you already know I have to go." Bran's eyes shimmered for a moment. "I do. And when the world forgets you, I'll still remember." Jon turned to Arya. "Come with me." She looked surprised. "What?" "You were never meant to stand still. You're faster than this world. Wilder. Maybe the north was too small for you." Arya stared at him, then looked toward the sea. A small smile touched her lips. "I was already thinking of sailing west, past where the maps end." Jon smiled back, tired but real. "Then maybe we'll both vanish. Different roads, same reason." Bran looked at them both. "Legends disappear so the world can move on." Jon took one final look at the godswood. Then he turned, walked to Drogon, and placed a hand on the dragon's warm scales. Ghost padded up from the trees, fur dusted with snow, and nuzzled Jon's leg. Arya hugged him tight. "No more dying," Jon laughed softly. "Not unless it's final this time." They pulled apart, and without another word, Jon climbed onto Drogon's back. Ghost leapt up behind him. Drogon rose, wings stretching wide. He looked down at Bran. Bran nodded once. And then the dragon lifted into the air, vanishing into the snow-filled sky toward the endless north. Arya stood in silence, watching until the black speck vanished. Bran sat beneath the tree. Sansa arrived beside him. "So, he's gone?" Bran nodded. "Yes, but he gave us something more powerful than a throne." "What's that?" she asked. Bran looked to the sky. "A future."